This episode of Fireside Chat is brought to you by Robert Woodward, lawyer at Altador Law. He specializes in family law, wills, and estates for Flame fans in Calgary and Southern Alberta. Call Robert at 403-771-2187 and mention Fireside Chat to get $100 off any legal service.
Are you ready? Sea of Red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, this week we saw the end of the 7-game win streak for the Calgary Flames and Jarome Iginla night. It was a busy week for the team, and as always, I'm Dan alongside Matt, and we'll break this game down a little bit. Let's start with the games, and then we can swoop back to Jarome Iginla night. How does that sound, Matt?
Perfect.
So the first game of the week was the sixth straight victory in a row for the Calgary Flames when they beat the Islanders 3-1. This was a game they really needed to win, especially after the last one. We weren't sure what we were going to see from the team. Smith made 26 straight saves, and Backlund got the go-ahead goal in this one. Overall thoughts on this game against the Islanders?
They completely just dominated the New York Islanders, and frankly, with how the Islanders played in the two games against the Flames, I'm kind of curious at, how they got to be as good as they are in the standings, because their offensive game kind of sucks, and in both the games, Calgary really was in complete control, and the lack of adaptability of the Islanders is a little bit disconcerting. And I don't think that they're going to be long in the playoffs if they can't get some flexibility in how they attack.
You know what, though? Every year, I think every team has one or two, as a friend of mine used to call them, kryptonite teams. Teams you just can't beat and you look foolish against. And remember a couple of years ago that for the Flames, that was Edmonton? We went 2 or 3 years just looking foolish every time we played the Oilers. Maybe we're the kryptonite team for the Islanders this year.
Could very well be. It's weird because, the Islanders have been the best defensive team and one of the better overall teams. You just come to expect a little bit more than what we saw. If it wasn't for knowing that they were one of the top 5 teams in the league, you'd swear that they were middle of the pack in, say, 10th or 12th in the East and also ran.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought interesting stat on the stats line here. Calgary won 62% of the faceoffs against this team. Like you said, for a strong team, you should at least do better in the dot than that. I was kind of expecting a 50-50 split with those two teams.
Yeah. It was
Calgary's
pretty
not
much
that strong a faceoff team.
No, they're better than they have been in the past, but they're still not great. And the Islanders just seemed outclassed entirely, and that happens, but not much you can do for them. It was good to get the 2 points, though.
Yeah, so the goals came from Tkachuk, got his 25th on the year, Backlund his 17th, and Rasmus Andersson got his 2nd on the year, and that was assisted by Zarnik and Giordano. Zarnik got his 5th. So good to see some guys like Andersson getting a few points there.
True enough.
The next night, the Flames increased their lead in the Pacific, going to New Jersey, where Riddick was back in net. It was a back-to-back, and the Flames won this one 2-1. Bit of a scary incident with Mirko Mueller taken off the ice on a stretcher here, but I'll give my thoughts on this first. I thought the Flames played, I don't want to say Flames hockey, but they weren't definitely as dominant as the night before, but I thought this was pretty much your typical Calgary Flames game. And, whether it's a 3-1 win, a 9-1 win, or a 2-1 win, they got the 2 points because they played their game.
Yeah, if you look through the first 40 minutes, the Flames just completely walked all over the Devils, and that wasn't because of anything New Jersey did. It was just a talent discrepancy. And the Flames were tired in the third period and allowed the Devils to come back a bit and push a little more, especially after Mueller got hurt. And glad to hear that he's doing all right after that, because you never like to see anybody get hurt in that fashion, and it was an accident, but it's just still worrying. And it was nice to see Tkachuk going and getting the stretcher, so that way the paramedics could just, get over to where he was instead of having to focus on that as well.
I think the shot on goal count in this one really tells a story. 35 in favor of Calgary to 20 for the Devils.
Yeah, and I think it was like 25-8 or something like that after 2 periods. Like, it was a complete discrepancy through the first 40, and then they allowed them back in a bit in the third.
So that was the Flames' 7th win in a row after that Devils game, and that was the end of their road trip that started last week in Ottawa, spanned over the trade deadline, and then on Saturday they came back, and we know that was Jarome Iginla night. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but the Minnesota Wild ended up ending the Flames' 7-game win streak and beat the Flames 4-2, and I'll give some of my thoughts here first. Weird to see in that first period, there was a ton of icing. Like, the game was already late because of the ceremony, and then we had probably 8 or 10 icings. I'm like, oh, this game's going to go till midnight now. Big story we'll talk about later is that Bennett open net goal, or I guess lack thereof, but how do you miss that one? My overall thoughts on this, though, I thought the Flames played well. They got beat by a better goaltender. I think a lot of this just comes down to Dubnyk. What about you?
I agree. And it was very much the same story as the New Jersey game. The Flames completely outclassed the Wild for the first 40 minutes, but they didn't put them away and in that time. And Minnesota is a deep enough team where if you give them goals, they will take them. And they're a good enough team where they can hold the fort if they get the lead, and they did. And the third period was just something else.
Well, let's talk about a few of these stories here. So we talked about it. Bennett had a pretty sweet open net in the second period that he wasn't able to score on. I mean, Matt, you probably could have scored on that open net.
Well,
that's got to be...
those type of shots, like, he was wide open, and the pass, he just kind of shanked it a bit. And, like, if his stick had touched the puck, like, even 100th of a second earlier, it's a goal. But unfortunately, it is what it is, and it's disappointing, but things like that happen, and it's just frustrating, especially because of the fact that what happened in the third period. Like, if they had that Bennett goal, then perhaps things go differently in that game.
Well, and I think that one sort of sequence of, like you said, Bennett getting there, having the net open, and being just a little late, I think that's kind of the story of this game for the Flames. Just a little bit late.
Yeah, pretty much.
The other big storyline here was the Garnet Hathaway hit on Luke Kunin. Some people thought that it looked like it was intentional, and Hathaway didn't come back to the game after that, got us 5 minutes and a match penalty. It turned out the league decided not to pursue subsequent discipline, so there's no suspension or fine. What do you think? Should there have been some subsequent discipline on that one?
I can understand why the referees were very aggressive in throwing a 5-minute in a game at Hathaway, because it looked extremely disturbing, frankly, that, here's a guy looking like he's taking a guy and slamming his face into the boards. Like, it makes sense. But, we've spoken to Hathaway a number of times, and we've seen him play in the AHL with Calgary. He's not that type of guy. And it looked like he was just trying to avoid the hit, and the guy fell and then fell face first into the boards. And
we saw Luke Kunin back on the ice not too long after, which tells us that it probably wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it looked significantly worse than it was. Frankly, I didn't even think it deserved a penalty at all. So, like, I can understand why the NHL didn't have any subsequent discipline, because of the fact that other than Hathaway having his hand on the back of his neck, just like to avoid the hit, like, other than that, like, he didn't even touch him really. So, like, it didn't look like he slammed him into the boards or anything like that. It just looked like Kunin went to hit him, missed, fell, and smashed himself, basically. And it's disappointing, but it's not like it,
I think either
the
way,
NHL
if
got it
Kunin was
right.
out for the whole game or longer, it would have ended up being at least a fine.
I think it would have been the same either way, because it really didn't look like there was any intent whatsoever. It looked more like he just fell into the boards and Hathaway happened to be there.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I don't know. Player safety does some weird things sometimes.
True enough.
I guess the other big story here, we know that the second Wild goal was really Smitty behind his net and playing that puck as we see him do so often. Later on in the dressing room, Goudreau, and everyone's probably heard the comment by now, or sorry, yeah, not Goudreau, Giordano said in the dressing room later, we want Smitty to do that. And even though, once in a while it's not going to work out, they want him doing that. But that second goal was Smitty being out of position. In the third, I'd say that fourth goal, right through his 5-hole, probably his fault. He got booed in the third period by the home fans. What do you think of the Sea of Red booing our goalie?
Well, it's not nice to see our fans booing any of our players, but it is completely understandable. And, I even remember there was a couple of times where Mika Kiprasov got booed. And, like, that definitely wasn't justified, but it is what it is. Like, the Flames fans are very intense, and they want the team to do well. And, like, if you lose, but you're playing okay and you lose, okay, that's fine. But when you've struggled so badly in the early part of the season like Smith did, to the point where basically everybody was like, can we get a goalie, period, anybody? And then, like, after you can actually do something about it because of the trade deadline, you see that happen. Yeah, fans are going to be a little ticked off. And Smith when he's playing well, you can handle him giving up a stinker like that one. It's just that, like, that fourth goal, that's where it's like, do we put Rittich back in as the starter full time again for a bit? Or, I
think if the fourth goal would have been a standalone incident and we didn't have the second goal that everyone says Smith also bungled, I think we could have probably forgiven it. But I think for Calgary fans, on a very emotional night anyways, I think it was too much for fans to look at those two in the same game.
Yeah, and especially when you lose by 2 goals. And
that's a good point too, yeah.
It's frustrating, and, like, I think everybody wanted the team to win for Iggy, and it didn't happen. But it is what it is.
Smith was very professional later in the dressing room. When asked about getting booed, he pretty much said that, you know what, they paid their money. If they want to boo, they can boo. But you know that it's going to affect them. And I guess I'd rather have it happen to Smith than Rittich, because I think Smith is enough of a pro who's been around the league longer. He can probably handle it better than a younger goalie like David Rittich.
Well, frankly, I'd like for Smith to be a little pissed off by that and try to do better. And, like, he was doing so well up until that game that, like, you don't want to see him regress into not being confident in himself. Because when Smith's confident and playing well, he's an all-star goaltender. It's just that we've only seen that for, like, 2 very small segments of the season, and then we've had, like, what happened in the Minnesota game for basically every other appearance. So hopefully he can return to form the next time he's in the net and play like Mike Smith can, and not let that get to him where he starts second-guessing himself in the net a bit and gives up more stinker goals for just because.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he looked great last year up until the
injury against the Islanders.
Yeah, well, even last year he was looking good right up until that break in January.
True enough.
And then he got hurt, and I think that he's probably still nursing something. Like, just seeing how his plays decreased in a year, he's got to be nursing something.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. And the one good thing, you never want to be talking about secondary goalies, but it seems that all of the other organizational goaltenders that we have gotten over whatever their funk has been to the start of the season. Like, Gillies is in his last 8 or 9 games has put up like a .930 save percentage, Parsons has been doing well. McDonald's been doing well. So
Schneider's even been looking good this year.
yeah, so we have options if both Riddick and Smith start really stinking up in March.
I'm not sure that any of those options, though, especially if we're looking for a deep playoff run, are going to do us any better.
No, but, you know,
I mean, that would be the real Cinderella story. If, Calgary calls up John Gillies and the call-up goalie takes the team all the way to the cup, I can't see that happening.
Well, it happened a couple of times. We just need whichever one of the guys to channel Ken Dryden or Patrick Waugh. That's fine. They have it in them. Come on, guys.
Kipper hasn't officially retired yet. Let's bring him back. So I guess, in the end, my comment on this one, I said to you before we went on the show, the Calgary Tower was lit up for Iggy, and so was Mike Smith lit up in this game.
Yeah.
Not the best showing for him. I mean, it's not all his fault. I would say even that fourth goal, it was a bit of a defensive lapse, but, as the goalie, you've got to be better than he was, and there was more bad than good in this one.
Yeah, like that third goal was also a really bad defensive lapse, and if it wasn't for Rasmus Andersson making a very bad pinch, then it's potentially a tie game heading into the final minutes. And maybe that fourth goal doesn't even happen. So, it's one of those things where it seems like it was death by 1,000 paper cuts. And, like the waved off goal, then the Bennett missed chance. So many missed chances for the Flames in the first two periods. And then the bungled third period. It seemed like everything conspired to deliver the Flames a loss in that one.
I think that Peters put it very succinctly when he was talking to us media guys at the end of the game, and it was pretty much the Flames looked good for the first two, and then they ran out of gas. And he said that happened to the team as well when they came back from their last road trip out east. There's a big time change. They played 3 games in 4 days. He thinks they just ran out of gas. And that, I think from what we saw, that's probably about true.
Yeah, and it makes sense. The Flames, I think they traveled 27,000 kilometers in the month of February. Come on. They're human beings, it's gonna happen. And
well, how many times, we went, east-west, east-west, east-west.
Yeah, exactly. Just ridiculous travel schedule for the team. And, you can only expect so much. I don't even think some teams travel 27,000 kilometers in their entire season. So
looking back on February, they opened it on the road, Washington, Carolina, came back for 1 game against the Sharks, went back on the road to Vancouver, Tampa, Florida, Pittsburgh, came back for 3 games, then went back on the road out east to Ottawa, New York, New Jersey. So yeah, these guys were on the road a lot, and that's one of the reasons I don't want to necessarily throw Smith under the bus for that 1 game, because he was probably just as jet lagged and tired as everybody else, but I think we need to give him another shot, but it didn't look good for anybody there.
No, and fans are frustrated because you just look at it almost they treat it like a video game where the team is good, so they should just be able to go out and play at their level, but they're also human beings, and the ridiculous travel that they had to go through and going from playing at 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock to back to 7 o'clock, and back and forth, that really does mess up your internal clock, and it does cause little problems. And
then they also had a weird schedule on game day. They were on the bench longer because the Iggy thing ran long, so these guys had their regular schedule disrupted for that game. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but it's just all these little things, like you said, death by 1,000 paper cuts of they just need to get back in a normal schedule of playing hockey at the Dome.
Exactly. And thankfully for the most of March, they are at home, so hopefully they can play well and get back into the swing of things.
And the last game of the week, and it's currently ongoing as you and I are talking. It's we're at the 16:06 mark of the second, and Calgary's down 3-0 to the Maple Leafs right now.
Yeah, one of those games where the first 10 minutes the Flames were by far the better team, and then a couple of bad things happened, and it's 3-0. And there's not really been any pushback by the team since, so yeah, it is what it is.
You know, watching these two teams, if you had the Toronto offense, the Calgary defense, and the Toronto goalie, you'd probably have your undisputed Stanley Cup team.
Honestly, if you gave Frederik Andersen to the Flames, you have your likely Stanley Cup champion. You know, and that's not to say Anderson's the best goalie in the world, but he is clearly better than everybody else on the team. And it's
Toronto
4-0.
just got their fourth.
Yeah.
Guys just scored in pairs tonight. Ennis got 2, Hyman got 2.
Yeah.
So the question is, do they change goaltenders now? We'll see.
Yeah. Well, the Flames are due for a stinker, and this appears to be one. And hopefully,
you know, we just had a 7-game win streak, though. I mean, having a couple bad games after that, you know, you go on those win streaks. You can kind of, I guess, you go on those win streaks to afford a couple bad ones, right?
Yep. And the Flames will just need to figure out their stuff in the next couple of days before they play Vegas and then Arizona, and hopefully have their stuff together this upcoming week instead, because I don't see them coming back from a 4-0 deficit.
No, me neither. I don't necessarily think it'll be a shutout, but I think the Flames are done.
Yeah, and you know, that's like priority number one this offseason is getting a legitimate goaltender for the Flames.
For sure.
You know, Rittich is all right, but he's not a world beater. And, like, they don't really need a world beater. They just need somebody that's above average as a starter. And, like, they don't have a reliable guy in that at all. So
I think if you look at, they've upgraded their forwards, they've upgraded their defense. Goaltending since Kipper left, it's kind of been a revolving door. And I think, like you said, that's the missing piece. So I really think Treliving's going to go out and make a big deal over the summer to address that. Because really the only thing he's got to address besides the Kachuk contract.
Yeah, and you have to go by sort of like the way I always look at it is triage. Like, what is the biggest problem with the team? And like last year and like the year before, right wingers was like the Achilles heel of the team. Then Treliving dealt with it. Okay, well, what's left? And now it seems to be goaltending, and we'll see. Like, I'm not too overly concerned about this season because of the fact that you just don't know how the team is going to fare in the playoffs. But it's for sure like that. You look at like Chicago back when they won with Antti Niemi. Like, they were so good that they could handle a rather lousy goaltender in Antti Niemi to be their starter, and they still won the cup. And I think that's the only time that I can remember a team winning a cup with mediocre goaltending. And the Flames right now, they have mediocre goaltending that's inconsistent. Like, when they're on, they're great, but when they're not, yikes. And that we need just somebody that's okay. Like, you're not needing a world beater, just okay.
Well, and I'm hoping that between the two guys, they can string together, 4 wins per round.
Exactly. And, like, honestly, the thing that because if you look at, like, the rest of the teams in the West and how, like, the Flames stack up in every other aspect, the Flames are clearly the best team in the West. The only thing that can be the equalizer is bad goaltending. So, we'll see.
Well, let's look at those other teams in the West. Right now, but partway through this Toronto game, Calgary sits at 89 points, puts them still number 1 in the West. San Jose is right behind them at 86 points, and Winnipeg not too far away at 82 points. So I've said this to you before. I still think there's going to be a battle this month of us flip-flopping that first position with San Jose, and I think the game on the 31st is probably going to be the one that's going to seal one team as the first-place team.
Yeah. And, like, it would be extremely disappointing after having a 7-point lead a couple days ago to lose that position, but, it's on the team. Like, you have your own you're controlling your own destiny, and if you blow it, well, that's on you. And the Flames, if they just play better than San Jose from tonight forward, they win the division, and that's all they have to do. Because, like, frankly, none of the other teams, Winnipeg, Nashville, Vegas, none of them are going to catch Calgary. It's only San Jose. That's the only team that matters. So they just have to be better than one team, and they win the conference.
Like I said, I think Calgary's going to falter a bit this month. I think. I don't think we necessarily go on a big run again, but like you said, it's just being better than San Jose down the stretch.
Well, the thing is that after this week, when we play Vegas twice and Arizona once, like we only play 3 of the remaining 14 games or 13 games against good teams, and like 10 of them are against, frankly, mediocre to bad. So the Flames could easily bounce back and go on a run. It depends on what they're doing. And
as you mentioned before, they do have a pretty favorable schedule, so that could be helping them as well.
We'll just have to see. And it's frustrating that they seem to be getting in their own way, frankly. And like right now, when you give up 4 goals on 14 shots, like you're not doing yourself any favors.
No, you're definitely not. Well, let's hopefully look at someone that might be a little more positive for the Flames in the goaltending. That's Oscar Fantenberg. We talked about him last week, came into Calgary at the deadline. He's played 2 games. He played in the Minnesota game, and he played in the New Jersey game, and he's not in the lineup tonight against Toronto. Oliver Shillington has got back in there, so Oliver and Oscar swapped positions. I thought in the Minnesota game, which is where I really got to see him live, I thought Fantenberg looked really good as a bottom pairing guy. I don't know if he'll be back next year because I don't know that he wants to be a number 7, which is what he'd end up being at least, if not 8. But, I thought, wow, this guy looks very serviceable as a number 6.
Yeah. Like, if the Flames... Actually, it's one of those things where if the Flames chose to move a defenseman or two, having Fantenberg as the number 6 would be perfectly acceptable.
I would go Fantenberg over Proud at this point.
Oh, same here. And, it's one of those situations with how, like, contracts are coming up. You're going to likely have to choose between Hamonic and Brody, because they're both free agents at the end of next season. And, frankly, we don't have another Hamonic, but we do have plenty of Brodies style defensemen in the team. So I'd be more likely to move, say, Brody and keep a guy like Fantenberg and make him like the 6-7 guy instead. And
I have a feeling what you'll see is Fantenberg's people saying, you know what, let's shop the market because, everybody needs a depth defenseman, and if we can't find a really good offer, then we'll call the Flames back.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And he should get a better offer elsewhere. It's just that the Flames should try to bring him back, because I think he has, like, he's one of the players that I was actually surprised that was moved at the deadline, because of the fact that he seemed like the perfect player for LA to kind of retool around. Just to, like, have a good player as they go through their mini rebuild. And, like, I didn't expect them to even move him, because he would have been a decent 3-4 for them for the next couple of years.
I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't want to stay in LA and they were cutting their losses.
Yeah, and that would make sense, but I hope that they bring him back, because he's played well enough where he looks like a very solid depth option, and it wouldn't be a bad thing if we kept him for a long time.
Yeah, I thought he looked like he gelled well in the lineup, so hopefully we'll see him as a Flame next year.
Plus, age-wise, like, you could sign him to, say, like, a 3-year deal, and he'd just be turning 30.
Yeah, I don't know you want to sign a depth guy like that to a 3-year.
You could.
Most of those guys end up getting a year, because you never know who might come out of the farm or what you might want to do with that position.
True enough.
And I think with the Flames next year having a bit of a cap crunch, I think they're going to want to keep contracts short for supporting cast members.
True enough. Unless they get him for, like, say, like 1.1 for 3 years, then it's like, okay.
Yeah, but even then, I think you do 1 year and you say if it's good, we'll re-up you.
Yeah, true enough.
I think if you look around the league, a lot of guys in Vandenberg's spot are doing 1 years. There's not a lot of 3-year deals being given out in those kind of roles. Well, Matt, I was looking at the injury reports. It looks like Stone, Michael Stone, is back on the ice. He's got the non-contact jersey off, which means he's probably on his way back soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him assigned to the AHL for a conditioning stint. And James Neal's got to be coming back soon. He's been evaluated. I don't think he's on the ice, but he's going to be back soon. And I was thinking on the Saturday game, just looking at the lineup, you hate to say it for Neal, but I really don't miss him in the lineup.
Well, Neal hasn't been James Neal all season.
If he was James Neal from last year, we'd definitely be missing him. But where he is, I mean, he's been replaced by Zarnik pretty well.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the time off allows him to rejuvenate himself in time for the playoffs and he becomes the real deal instead of what he's been this season. So, if he does play well when he gets back, I wouldn't be shocked if he was slotted into the second line opposite Backlund and Tkachuk.
I don't know I'd put him in there right away. I think, you want to give him a couple games. The interesting question is, who do you sit? Because Zarnik has looked so good lately, and Mangiapane seems like the obvious guy to sit, but he's looked so good lately.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, at this point, Hathaway's the odd man out.
It depends on, who you're playing. Like, if you're playing more of a physical team, then Hathaway should stay in, and I'd sit Eat Bread. And if you're playing more of a skill finesse team, then sit Hathaway and put Frolik in his spot instead.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see the second line, Tkachuk, Backlund, and Zarnik when Neal first comes up. I think it gives Zarnik a bit of a reward for what we've seen him do over the last couple of weeks. I think Neal will probably slot into that third line, which is Bennett, Jankowski, Neal, where he has been for most of the year. And I think once he's, back and going again, they'll move him up to the second line.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then for Stone, I don't know about you. I don't really see him getting a spot in the lineup regularly. I think he's going to end up being your number 7, where they'll, move him and Shillington around. But this back end's working well. You don't really want to touch it at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Stone goes down for like a week and a half as a conditioning stint. Not only just to get him back up to speed, but kind of to avoid the whole situation for a bit until you need to bring him back.
Yeah, how long are you allowed to be down there? Is it?
I think it's 10 days.
Yeah, I thought it was 10 games, 10 days or 5 games or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I can see that as well. And even when he comes back, I think, by the time he comes back, I think it'll be late March, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the lineup because they might start sitting guys like the captain, as we move towards the playoffs. So maybe they'll open a spot for him that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
But otherwise, I don't think he's going to have a good spot or a full-time spot in this lineup, but a good depth
it's
piece
just like how
forward.
they slotted Fantenberg in. Like, they might just decide to sit Rasmus Andersson for a game just to allow Stone to get some minutes. And
yeah, I don't know. Raz is doing well. I don't think you'll see Stone. I think you'll see Stone play leading up to it, and I think he's a great depth piece for that first round of the playoffs, but I don't think once we hit the playoffs you see him. I think Raz stays in. Raz is looking good. I think if anyone comes out, it'll be Shillington.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of who they swapped for Fantenberg. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Raz has even made his way up to the top pairing this year.
I know. And it was nice to see that Treliving giving Valinaki an ego boost by saying that we were not trading you.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that? So Treliving actually phoned Valimaki in Stockton and told him there's no way we're moving you.
Yeah, and that's basically the whole story. And, as for a young player to have the general manager say that we view you as being vastly too important to include in a deal for a guy like Mark Stone, that's
not just a young player. Young players playing in the American League.
That's an amazing vote of confidence. And honestly, but in the lead up to the deadline, I even said that, if anybody calls on any of the young defensemen, you just hang up the phone. And that's why, because you look at Valimaki, he's profiling to be Giordano's replacement as the number 1 defenseman on the team. He's big, he has a great shot, he's very composed defensively, and he's quick. Like, what, those don't grow on trees. Like, there's might be like 7 guys in the entire league that have that profile. So, like, if Valimaki develops fully, like, you're talking a Victor Hedman type player. Like, that's a big deal. And so him not getting dealt, like, that's great in my books.
Yeah, and like you said, a good vote of confidence for him. I think he's going to be a guy that we'll see back up here for the playoffs. And, between him and Anderson, I'm really excited by what we have on the blue line. And like you said, maybe it makes us make some more, let's say, some more bold moves in the offseason with one of our blue liners.
Well, it makes it a lot easier because eventually Giordano's going to start regressing into being a human being instead of the Norris Trophy winner to be that he is. And the team will need to reallocate the cap that Brody takes up. And like Hamonic, when he re-signs, because he will get re-signed, he's not going to be making drastically much more than he already is. So he might make another $500,000 a year, maybe $1 million at most, on like a 4-year deal. And like Brody, that frees up like $5.25 million for the long term, which you can reinvest in either another good forward, a top tier goaltender.
I was gonna say, I think at this point you got to invest in the goalie first.
I agree.
They're going to invest in Tkachuk. That's their top tier goalie for the offseason. Otherwise, the money's got to go in net.
Yeah.
And if they're looking for a really top tier, it's not going to be available July 1st. There's some okay guys, but I think what we're going to find is if we're wanting that, we're going to have to trade for that asset, and goalies are expensive.
Yeah. Unless you can convince Sergei Bobrovsky to come on down.
Even that, I don't think that we can afford. He's going to be the most sought-after goalie on the market. I think somebody's going to throw $10 million at him, and we can't do that.
Yeah, well, if somebody does that, that's kind of dumb.
I mean, the next guy after that is Semyon Varlamov, who's any good.
Bad.
And I think
he's bad. I wouldn't even sign him.
He's the next most attractive name on that list, though, and I think he's going to be really expensive too, just because it's a slow market.
Yeah,
there's a lot of mediocre guys or great backups. I still think Kincaid might be worth taking a shot at, but we can talk about that more as we get closer to July 1st. But if they want a really top tier goalie, it's going to cost them.
Yeah. And they're going to have to shop around. And
now, luckily, defensemen are good currency as well. So I think, trading a defenseman and something for the goalie might get it done.
Yeah, and there are a few teams that have multiple good young goaltenders. It just, we'll have to see. Like, you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, they have Tristan Jarry, who's doing all right. They have Casey DeSmith, who's doing all right. And, of course, Matt Murray. So, there are teams out there that have multiple good young goaltenders.
I think if you're Calgary and you're going to go out and trade for it, though, you got to trade for an established guy.
I agree. But
I think if you make a trade for Tristan Jarry or something like that and he craps the bed, you've kind of lost it all. You got to go out and get a veteran.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like where back when Anaheim traded Anderson to Toronto, where you have two young-ish goalies that are like establishing themselves as being decent NHL guys, and picking up whichever one that they don't view as their starting goalie.
Yeah, I think the big difference there was Toronto at the time wasn't in the playoff hunt they are now.
True enough.
And if we were with the Calgary where they were 4 years ago, yeah, I think that'd be good, is build around the goalie, and that's what they did in Toronto. So I think if the Flames want to make a run next year, they've got to go veteran quickly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Not a really old guy,
yeah,
like a Fleury, but I think you need somebody with a couple years of already existing starter experience under his belt.
Now, here's a question for you, and it's a bit of an oddball. What about Henrik Lundqvist as a short-termer?
I wouldn't do it. I think the older you get, and I think we're seeing that with Smith as well, the older you get, the less reliable a guy might be, and I think Lundqvist's going to cost a lot, and it'd be hard to get out from under that. If you're looking for a short-term guy, I guess it depends if you look at Lundqvist as a short-term starter or not. If you're just looking to have a veteran guy around, I think there'll be cheaper options like a Cam Ward who could play half your games or less as your backup. If you're going to go with, say, Rittich as the starter, at Lundqvist's age, I mean, from what we're seeing from Smith, I don't know I want to go with another really old goalie.
Yeah.
If you could bring him as a backup or something, like when they brought, Fury in or Cujo in as a backup guy, sure. Even when they brought Verney back, but I don't think you can look at him as the starter. What do you think?
Yeah, that's about where I'm thinking as well.
Well, that's about all the Flames news except for the big retirement day. Shall we move on to that, Matt?
I suppose so. We didn't really want to cover this, but I guess we have to spend a few minutes on it.
This is where grown men were crying on Saturday night when it was Jarome Iginla Day here in Calgary. Jarome Iginla's ceremony before the game started at 6:30. I thought it was a really well done ceremony. I was there when they did the Vernon retirement. I was there when they did the Al MacInnis jersey raising for the Forever a Flame. I thought both those ceremonies dragged on. I thought this one was good. There's a ton of guys. It was awesome to see again. But I'm glad there was only two guys that spoke. It was pretty much Peter, Connie, and Jarome. Peter Marr was the MC for those that didn't see it. I don't think you could have asked for a classier ceremony. I loved having all his trophies there. You probably saw that as he walked by. I loved the thing with the kids from Kids Sport, who he supported. It was really well thought out. And I hate to say it, a lot of stuff the Flames do often seems like it's thrown together last minute when they do game presentation stuff. This seemed like it was really, had some thought put into it, and I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, it was by far the best of the ones I saw, which was the Vernon, MacInnis, and Nieuwendyk, as well as the Iginla. And I thought that one was the best of the four.
Which it should be.
Oh, for sure. And you had it just right, having just Conroy and Peter Marr talking. And I was glad that Conroy was able to keep it under 20 minutes.
I was sitting up in the press box, and some of the directors for the game were up there with their headphones on, like, somebody signaled to him, he's done. And then I heard the guy yelling, he's over. It's like, it's Conroy. Of course he's overtime. But you could see them on the ice signaling to him, like, wrap it up, Connie, wrap it up.
I know, you gotta get, the Oscars music going, playing him off the stage.
Yeah, that could work. Or have somebody, grab... when they used to use the canes to pull guys off stage? You could use a hockey stick to pull them off the stage. I think what helped there was they'd made it a whole weekend festivity. I mean, they had a big luncheon beforehand. They had lots of stories on the website ahead of time, so we didn't need to hear mom talk and dad talk. That had already been done, and I think that's nice. Those pieces were there to help fans get excited. But those people that really wanted to share their thoughts... I mean, Sportsnet 960 did a big piece on it. There was a piece on TV. I think all these guys like Joe Sakic, who wanted to share their stuff, mom and dad, we got to see it, and it didn't necessarily need to be at that ceremony.
I agree.
But yeah, I thought really well done. Interesting note here. I went back and looked. The Calgary's retired 3 jerseys now, and they're 1-1-1 on those nights. The Flames defeated the Whalers 5-4 the night they retired Lanny's jersey. They lost to the Blackhawks 3-2 in a shootout the night they retired Vernon's. And last night, or I guess Saturday night now, they fell 4-2 to the Wild when retiring Jerome's number 12. Also, we should note, you and I were talking last week about what the jersey was going to look like. It did end up being the retro red. I didn't know what I think of the retro red banners because, me, I'm a bit of a purist. And, they wore the white at home back in the 80s, but they look good. They did a good job with the retro red.
Yep. Oh, so the Flames scored a goal. Yay.
Did they? Who scored?
You're asking too many important questions.
Johnny Gaudreau, unassisted, his 31st of the year.
Good.
That's why you keep me around.
Yes.
My brain started going after Saturday and thinking, who do you think will be the next number to go up on those rafters? I don't think we ever get Kipper back to do it.
Honestly, Kipper, I think personality-wise, even if they retired the jersey, I don't even think he'd show up.
Well, that's what I mean. I don't think they would do it without him, and I don't think you'll ever get him back to do it.
Yeah.
I think 34 is taken out of circulation like 14 is, but I don't think you ever see that one retired.
Yeah, I honestly, knowing his personality, he probably just doesn't care at all.
Could we Skype him in from his fishing boat?
You know, like, he didn't even go to pick up his Vezina trophy. Like, he couldn't care less.
I was kind of disappointed he didn't come in for Jarome's ceremony.
I can understand it, though. You know, him being himself, he just doesn't care about that kind of stuff.
I'm hoping he at least called Jarome.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure that all of the players keep in touch. But yeah, like I wasn't shocked when he didn't show up. You know, like, I think everybody would like to show their appreciation to Kipper, but you know, it takes two to tango, and I just don't think he cares, simply.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to knock on wood when I say this. If the Flames win the cup this year, knock on wood, if he showed up in the parade.
I wouldn't be shocked there either.
I think if the Flames win this year, Jarome becomes your parade marshal because he then finally gets to be with the cup he never got. And I wouldn't be surprised if the lead float was him and Kipper.
Yeah.
I'm
going to disagree with you there. I think that'd be a little arrogant of those two guys if they were to, you know, they didn't win it. The Flames did, so, you know.
What if there was a banner on their float that said, this time it was in?
Yeah. You know, they would definitely be included. It's just that they wouldn't be leading it.
Yeah, and I think this year, if you win, you send Jarome a ring.
Give him a honorary job in the office in case they do win. And
New England scout.
Special assistant to Craig Conroy.
Special assistant to the assistant general manager. Because for those that don't know, when Connie first got hired, they didn't really know what to do with him. So his title was special assistant to the GM, not assistant GM, special assistant. So you could be the special assistant to the assistant general manager.
Yep.
What does that mean? Do what Connie tells you.
Yeah.
Sit and listen to Connie's stories for 6 hours.
Oh, God, you don't want to torture the guy. You know, jeez. You already played with him for like 10 years.
Hey, Jarome, we got a long road trip. I'm going to phone you on the plane. He'd tell his wife, give me some chores to do. Quick, I don't want to talk to Connie again.
Oh, God, no, not again.
But all those things... And Connie likes to tell the same stories again. Like, he told that same Iggy story all weekend. So
yeah,
it'd probably be like, hey, Jarome, have you heard the story about what... Yes, you told me yesterday. What about this story? You told me this morning.
Leave me alone. I'm going to file a restraining order. Leave me alone.
Call Kipper, son. Here's his number. Anyway, I honestly think looking at those things, the next number we see go up is going to be number 5.
Yeah, either that or 14. It depends. Like, honestly, I think
next year's the 40th anniversary of the team. That would be the time to do 14.
Yeah.
I was surprised he wasn't at the Jarome Iginla retirement. I don't know if that tells us something about his relationship with the team, but that would have been sort of the right time to put him in front of the public again.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Like, maybe that Iginla and Fleury didn't have, like, the best of relationships. Who knows? Yeah.
I don't think that Fleury and Verney Iggy and Verney probably had much of a relationship either, but
yeah. Who knows?
I don't know. It's I still, as a Fleury fan growing up, I'd still love to see 14 in the Rafters.
Yeah.
I think if it hasn't happened by now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like, once, like, everybody that was involved in the 90s with Fleury is no longer a part of the organization, then I think that he gets retired. But, you know, there are still people around, so
I think if, based on kind of what Ken King's doing, I think you got to put him up there as a forever Flame at the very least.
Yeah. And, you know, like, it's one of those situations where, yeah, Theo was a bit of a dick, or a lot of a dick.
But you could say the same thing about Nieuwendyk, holding us up for a contract.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's been 20 years, and, you know, to be frank, Fleury does have an acerbic attitude at times.
But to me, we're not putting him up there because he's a nice guy. We're putting him up there to honor him as a hockey player. It's not his face going up, it's his jersey going up.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I was going to make, is that, you know, like, love him or hate him, you know, he was the best player until Jarome Iginla came along. And, there's frankly no excuse why his number isn't already retired, frankly.
Talking about the best player, I thought it was pretty awesome at Jarome's thing when Lanny McDonald narrated the Jarome Iginla video. I thought that was like the passing of the torch right there.
I agree.
Another really nice touch.
I agree. The Flames really did a top-notch job with the whole, with everything on Iginla night. It was first class all the way, and that hasn't always been the case, but they really did come through.
I think if nothing else, it really shows how much Iggy means to everybody. You know, that we got. I mean, I can't remember last time there was a logo for a jersey retirement. Like, you know, they went all out. There was T-shirts for everybody. There was all sorts of merch. There was it was a great time for everybody. And you know, Jarome was Jarome again. Like, he was there until 1 a.m, signing autographs and taking pictures. I don't know about you, it didn't feel like a lot of guys when they leave. It's like, wow, Jarome's home. Like, you know, it didn't feel like he was coming back. It just felt like he was home, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
It almost felt like he'd never left.
I know, and like it was so disappointing that he never won the Stanley Cup with the Flames, because he was the Calgary Flames for so many years, and it's disappointing because he meant so much both on the ice, but even more so off the ice, for all the good things that he did for everybody. And it was a magical night that the fans could reciprocate and show him how much we cared about him and how much he was important to us as hockey fans, as a person and as a player.
And even for the other guys, like, you know, number 9 and number 30, I don't remember hearing anybody fly into Calgary for those. Like, people were coming from all over the country for Jarome's.
Oh, for sure. And it was even nice seeing a guy like Matt Dumba being thrilled to be there just because of the fact that he was a huge Iginla fan when he was a kid. And, like, how awesome was it to be there, even though he was on the opposition, just to be in the building. And, you know, like, he showed a lot of enthusiasm, and, you know, Iginla was very inspirational for a lot of people, and especially people of color. Like, you know, hockey is a vastly majority white sport, and for a number of years, the best player in the NHL was a black guy. And, you know, to you and me, who are both white, that's not a big deal, but to other communities, that is a major thing. And it's just nice all the way around. And, you know, I'm just glad that it basically, other than the game itself, the whole night went perfectly.
I'll sum it up just by saying Iggy is number 12 in the Rafters and will always be number 1 in our hearts.
I agree 100%.
I don't know. I'm feeling it again. I almost let's move on. It's just thinking about Jarome and what he did for this city. You know, not just on the ice but off the ice. He was a special guy.
I agree.
Well, Matt, I was doing some research this week, and it turns out Matchsticks and Gasoline actually happen to be doing the same research because they published a similar article. But wanted to look at this and see how this team was built, and I think we'd be kind of surprised by it. So let me go through some of the numbers here of what I found. Most of this team was acquired through trade. If we take a look, Oscar Fantenberg, Elias Lindholm, Noah Hannafin, Dalton Prout, Travis Hamonic, Michael Stone, and Mike Smith, all acquired through trade. Obviously, Fantenberg, the newest trade, and Smith, the oldest of that group, I believe. No, Stone would be the oldest of the trades. But, you know, Brad says that he built his teams in the summer, and most of those guys, if you look at them, were acquired at the draft. So, you know, not always free agency, but he does like to get his work done at the draft in the summertime.
Well, it makes sense. That's when prices are always cheapest, so you might as well go for it.
Smith wasn't a draft day acquisition, but he was during the summer. Stone was a trade deadline deal, I believe.
Yep.
Hamonic was the summer. Prout was mid-season. Hannafin was the summer. Lindholm was the summer. So a lot of summer guys there. The next highest group was guys that were picked in the first round by the Calgary Flames. And as much as we've talked a lot about, the Flames not having a lot of picks in the first round the last couple of years because Brad trades them, we have Backlund, Jankowski, Monahan, Bennett, and Tkachuk, who are all picked by us, plus first-round picks from other teams like Hanifin and Lindholm, who I didn't include there. But Tkachuk, Bennett, Monahan, Jankowski, Backlund. So I'd say all those guys really that we picked in the first round, key cogs to this team.
Oh, for sure. And if you also make one little caveat, a player that was drafted in the first round was traded for one of the key players on the team, which that was the 2011 first round pick. Sven Berchi was traded for a second round pick, which was used to get Rasmus Andersson. So a kind of roundabout way of including him in that as well.
Yeah, I didn't look at those kind of things when I was doing this, but yeah, for sure. Free agents, only 4 guys here we acquired through free agency: Frolik, Zarnik, Neal, and Ryan. 3 of those 4 came this past summer.
Yeah.
Which kind of interesting. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, they were really trying to bolster that right wing and the forward lines, and they did that in the summer for sure.
Yeah, and you look at 3 of those 4 guys are playing very well relative to their contracts, and only James Neal's waffling a bit, but yeah, I don't
I'm
expect
still counting on the real deal to come out in the playoffs.
I agree, or at worst next season.
Yeah,
because you look at Travis Hamonic, he was bad, frankly, last year, but then this year we understood why we spent a first round pick to get him.
Yeah, no, you could be right. It could be that year of transition, especially on a team where he's not the number one guy and trying to find his role there. Undrafted free agents. This team we've talked about in the past has done pretty well. Our captain, one of the most important guys this year, undrafted, signed as a free agent. 2008 is the year that he came back from the KHL, and I'd say the year we really saw him bloom. Garnet Hathaway and our goaltender tonight, David Riddick, who's getting shelled by the Leafs. All undrafted free agents for this team.
Yep.
And then the Flames, as you and I have talked about a number of times, do well in those later rounds. That's where they've acquired a lot of their talent. 2015 second rounders, Rasmus Andersson and Oliver Shillington, both in the second round. And rounds 4 through 7, we have Mangiapane, Goudreau, and Brody, all later round picks. So I don't know. I always find it interesting to see how this team has made up. And it's a pretty good smattering of a little bit of everything.
Yep, and that's how good teams are built. You look at Chicago when they were in their run up to becoming an elite team and winning cups. They had about 20 players that were either drafted in the first 2 rounds or late round guys that emerged out of nowhere. And eventually that filtered out until they had the team that became their little mini dynasty. And the Flames, very much in a similar fashion, had a huge amount of good high-end prospects and later round guys that have developed into top-tier players. So, we're kind of on that same trajectory and just hoping that, we get the end results, frankly.
Well, and we see it more and more now, but, teams need cheap players. It's part of what happens in the modern NHL. I mean, you need to have guys that you might like them, but you know that they're cheap, they're expendable, and I like to call them the sub-1 millions, because as soon as that contract hits $1 million, the team knows they can't afford them and they've got to move them on. And I think a lot of those late-round picks are those guys, and if they show up like, a Mangiapane is, where he's being a good depth forward, you say, okay, we'll run that, we'll ride that till he's too expensive, and then we'll move him on and find the next guy. But, in the meantime,
and
you need those guys in your roster.
And that's part of the reason why, for the last couple of years, especially with the second and beyond round picks, I've been advocating to just draft for skill, because if they turn out, then you have a high-impact, cheap guy that you can plug into your team for a few years, while you're in that transitioning phase from, when you have to move out a higher end contract or 2, you have fresh troops that you can bring in that have a high amount of talent. Sort of like Jake Gensel in Pittsburgh, where they were able to slot him in, and they helped them to win a couple of Stanley Cups. And the Flames need to have that ability moving forward of having guys like that filter up through the organization and into key spots when they have to move out, say a guy like a Sam Bennett, if they have to, or whatever, insert any mid-range contract here, and that will become very important moving forward. It's just, we're still in that early phase, not, like 4 years from now when we're going to be needing those guys.
And I think a guy like Bennett or even a Jankowski is a good example. A guy who, they're a great third-line guy. You can move them up into the top six for a little bit if you need to because of injury or whatever else might be happening. But, they have a role in the team, and it's not always to be your top scorer, but they're a solid, middle six, cheap NHL forward.
Yeah, and if they get too expensive, then you have to move on.
And I think, it's a good problem to have, but I think that's where we're going to be on the blue line in 4 years, where we're not going to be able to keep all of our young guys, and we're going to have some hard choices to make.
Yep.
Just another note here, players from previous eras, 4 players acquired during the Jay Feaster era. Guy I sometimes forget was even in charge of this team. Sean Monahan, Mark Jankowski, Johnny Gaudreau, and Garnet Hathaway. Hathaway technically joined during that period when Feaster was out and Berkey was in before Treliving came. Do you remember the questions when we drafted Mark Jankowski when Feaster did? It's, he's just going to the U.S. colleges. Why do you make that pick? And turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I was probably the biggest Jankowski fan out of everybody on Calgary Puck, and he's lived up to a lot of my expectations, and he's still a work in progress, and I do see more upside in him. It's just he has to get more adapted and comfortable at the NHL level, and you're starting to see that more and more with him, where he's starting to use his body to protect the puck better and score some goals that way. And if he figures it out, he could be a 20-plus goal guy. He just has to find his way.
And then 3 players still remain on this team from the Daryl Sutter era. Another guy I was surprised not to see at the Jarome ceremony. Michael Backlund, TJ Brody, and Mark Giordano. And those last 2, number 7 and number 5, the last 2 players on this team who played with Jarome Iginla.
Yep.
Still some guys around who were part of that team. So good to see, some of those older guys still around, but it's interesting how if you look at those groups, Sutter, Feaster, Treliving, they've all got a very different type of player that were acquired during their time.
Yep. Well, different mindset, and frankly, the NHL was different at different points as well.
Yeah, I mean, Daryl Sutter's was if you're big and you're from Western Canada, you're a Flame.
Oh, I know. Some of those draft picks that we did were just so bad. I remember getting so upset at so many of the Flames drafts from like 2004 on. It just, yeah. Like, especially the one draft I hated the most was the 2008 draft, because of the fact that year was a very defensive, defenseman heavy draft. And, like, I'm always of the opinion where if there happens to be one position where there seems to be an inordinately large amount of talent in that one position, go nuts and draft as many of them as you can. Just because of the fact that sometimes just due to the amount of them that they get pushed down in the rankings more than they should. And, like, you look at TJ Brody, we got him in the 4th round. And, like, there's a number of high-end players that were selected when the Flames could have drafted them. And
interesting about 2008, the 17th pick was Jake Gardner to Anaheim, and that was Calgary's pick via Los Angeles. So could have had Gardner in that one.
Yeah.
Also interesting that we drafted at 25th Greg Nemitz, and next up was Tyler Ennis. That was a great scouting decision.
Yeah.
John Carlson, 2 down from us. So it's easy to go back in the drafts and look at the coulda, woulda, shouldas. But yeah, that was like you said, a very big draft for the Flames there, and missed out on some big guys.
Yeah, well, like just to carry on with that, the 53rd pick in the second round, 5 after when the Flames selected Mitch Wall was Travis Hamonic. And Derek Stepan was taken 3 picks after the Flames selected Wall. So, like, there was a couple of pretty good guys available. And
that Mitch Wall pick, when you look at it on paper, I love it because it says Mitch Wall, Calgary from LA. So Calgary traded their pick to LA and then traded back for it.
yeah.
It reads funny. It's Calgary from Calgary via LA. So anyway, but in the end, we've acquired a lot of other teams' first rounders. So it's like what we've made up in drafting, we've ended up bringing back here via trade or free agency.
Oh, true enough. It's just I've always been of that opinion though, and I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the show, so might as well.
Well, Matt, should we look ahead then?
Yep.
We'll call this Toronto game in the books at this point. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, it's 4-1 unless the Flames have some magic in the third period, which could happen, but more likely than not, we're talking about a 4-2 or something type loss. Yeah.
So with that, neither of us did too well in our predictions last week. I thought we'd win all but Toronto, and you thought we would lose to the Islanders, win to New Jersey, Minnesota, and Toronto. So we had it's like playing that game Mastermind, right games, wrong teams. You have like right color, wrong position. The right number of wins for the most part, just the wrong teams we'd lose to.
Yeah. Well, we were both one off.
I guess, yeah, with the Toronto game.
Yeah.
So this week the Flames have 3 games. They go on their longest road trip of the month, which is a 2-game road trip. I bet they're going to be happy to be going down to Vegas and California with this weather we've got. On Wednesday, Calgary is in Vegas. On Thursday for the back-to-back, they're in Arizona. Then they get a couple days off, Friday, Saturday, and they're back here on Sunday for another game against Vegas. So almost a doubleheader. We play Vegas Wednesday in their barn and Sunday back here in our barn. So, Matt, 3 games on the table. What do you think for this week?
Split the Vegas, and we beat Arizona.
Which Vegas game do you think we take?
I'll go with the road game. Win the next 2, lose the third one.
So you think we split Vegas and we lose the other Vegas game and the Arizona game? Why do you think so?
I think the Flames will bounce back after the Toronto game, and I think they'll take both of the games on the road. The Flames seem to do badly at home for some strange reason. Everybody on the team plays better at home except for the goalies, who play absolutely abysmally. And yeah, so that's why I'm kind of going that we'll beat Vegas, because after losing 2 in a row, I think the team will be hungry for another win. They'll just outclass Arizona like they have already 3 times this year, and then Vegas will exact some revenge when they come to the Saddledome.
Yeah, that could be. I'm going to go a little bit more optimistic. I think the Flames, after a big loss to the Maple Leafs, are going to give their heads a shake. I think that the warm weather will thaw them out, and I think that they're going to win all 3 this week. I think they beat Vegas, they beat Arizona. A couple days off, I think it'll be good for them, and then they'll come back and beat Vegas again.
As long as they get, if you look at from the New York Islanders game to the last Vegas game, that's a 7-game stretch. They play 5 of the games are against good teams, 4 of the games are against good teams, with the Leafs, the Islanders, and the 2 against Vegas, and the other 3 are against kind of the mediocre to bad style teams. And if they go 2-1 against the bad teams and split the good teams, that's fine, So, and then after that, the Flames are playing basically mediocre teams the rest of the way. So,
well, I guess that's part of the reason I want them to win the 2 Vegas games in Arizona. I mean, Vegas is a playoff team, so let's put some separation there.
Well, we've already kind of separated from there's only
from them, yeah, but it gives us Western Conference points.
Yeah. Well, frankly, we've gotten to the point where there's only 16 or less games, or fewer, I should say, fewer games for most teams in the West. So for teams like Winnipeg to make up 7 points, or Nashville to make up 8, or Vegas to make up 12, like, that's just not realistic. Unless, like, Calgary loses most of the games and the other teams win most of theirs. Like, it just, is too much of a bridge to gap. But, and you even look at, like, the playoff race in its entirety, and, like, everybody below Colorado who's in 10th is done. And even though they're only 6 points back, the Oilers are finished. And, you know, everybody else below them, like, it would take a miracle for any of the teams below Colorado to make the playoffs.
Yeah, they're not going to make it.
And, you know, it's the same in the East, where basically everybody below Philadelphia who's in 10th is done. And even Philadelphia, I would kind of say, is done as well.
We're getting to that point where we can start to see the end and know who's going to be in and who's not.
Yep.
I also think that by winning a couple against Vegas, we also kind of keep them where they are, and we help to not only, you know, cement ourselves at the top away from San Jose, but start to kind of shape who we're going to play in the playoffs.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Vegas is going to play either San Jose or Calgary, whoever's the lesser of the two. They're not going to catch either team, and likely you're going to see Nashville play St. Louis in the first round, and Winnipeg playing the second or the first wild card team, so whoever's in 7th, and Calgary, San Jose playing 8th.
Well, Matt, let's see how it goes. It'll be an interesting week. Kind of weird that, you know, the longest road trip of the month is a 2-game road trip, isn't it?
True enough, and it's nice to see, and hopefully the Flames, because they've kind of waffled a bit for most of the season at home, that hopefully they can get their stuff together. And
I'm hoping, being home for so long, they're going to figure it out.
Yeah, because
I don't know if it's necessarily they've waffled at home or they've waffled coming off weird road trips.
And, like, that's not to say, like, a 26-5 record is pretty damn good, but, you know, for how good they should be in terms of, like, their goaltending and, like, their overall team play, they should be better, even better than that at home. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if they can rectify it and get go on a little bit of a home winning streak after tonight.
Well, they've got 8 more home games this month, and only 5 road games. So hopefully they can, like you said, put it together at home and be ready for the playoffs. And Matt, I guess that's probably about it for this week. We'll talk to you next week after the couple Vegas games and see if Calgary can put everything together.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and thank you, Jarome Iginla, for everything that you did for this organization, and best of wishes to everything that you have moving forward.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.
Hey there, Iginla, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs. The economy's in trouble now, and Calgary's got some layoffs, yes we do. But we don't care, 'cause we've got you and oil. Hey there, Iginla, when you're riding on the bus and you are sitting next to Conroy, do you use some noise reduction headphones? You ought to try my set of Bose. Can I call you Jarome? Oh, you're better than Crosby, twice as good as the Sedins. Oh, if you played for the Maple Leafs, so you'd be on CBC every week. Hey there, Iginla, what is up with Daryl Sutter? He's got Jokinen and Kipper, who could never milk an udder to save their lives. What's next, a Czech or Muscovite? or a French guy. Hey there, Iginla, don't feel bad about Camilleri. You keep setting up his goals and he's a UFA this summer, but cheer up. He'll be a Leaf or a Canuck, and then he'll suck. Oh, you're better than Evgeny. Oh, you're smarter than Sundin. Oh, if you played out in the East, oh, you'd have some Hart trophies. Vancouver's soft, the Wings are tired. San Jose gets coaches fired. The Western Final goes right through the dome. Crosby's groin hurts when he skates. Ovechkin over celebrates. The Sea of Red will bring the cup back home. Iginla, I can promise you that by the time the Flames get through, this town will never ever be the same. When's the parade? Captain Iginla, I can't wait for 2010. You'll be the highlight of the night. Every night on TSN we cannot lose to Germany or Belarus. Has Stevie Y contacted you? Put in a good word for Phaneuf and Regier. You know, like what if Niedermeyer retires or something? You shoot harder than Mike Green, and you're nicer than Avery. Oh, if you played for Coach McT, you'd end up whining like Hemsky. Please stay in Calgary.